My name is Larry Jordan. I'm the chairman of this panel. I'm delighted to be chatting with you today. I'm a producer, I'm a director. Mostly recently, I've been spending my time teaching media and post-production, and we've assembled a panel to try to make sense of this whole world of visual communication. Today, media is both powerful and pervasive, but it's also a world that's populated by people that speak a strange language and work with strange gear. And rather than try and discuss whether media is powerful or not, I thought I would change the question for the discussion and ask the panel, what can non-filmmakers learn from the world of film, television, and games? What can non-filmmakers learn? So to begin our discussion, I thought I'd have everybody give me a 1 to 2 minute answer. And then after that, if you have questions, please type them into the chat and we'll tackle the questions in the 40 minutes that we have together as a group. Chris Bobotis, tell me what you've been up to and give me an answer. What can non-filmmakers learn from the world of film? Chris.
Sure. Thank you, Larry. So I come from content creation, specifically in advertising, film, and broadcast. I pivoted hard to content tool creation, specifically for immersive media, or as other people know it, AR, VR, XR. My take on this is, what do you have to learn? Everything. Absolutely everything. Whether you're involved in branded content, whatever it is that you're trying to move forward, you're going to be telling a story. What better medium then and now than filmmaking to learn from? And what better medium than the gaming industry to learn about future tech and future canvases that you'll have to paint on? That's my take on it.
Okay, Elizabeth Blake Thomas is next. Elizabeth, tell us what you're up to and what's your suggestion to answer.
Hi, okay, it was lovely to meet everybody. I was on this morning at 7 a.m. actually, and I live on a boat and I have a VW camper bus, and that I think sums up my type of personality. I'm very much about finding your purpose, finding your bliss. And so for me, it's about everything that I do, all encompassing, leads me to that. And therefore, as a filmmaker, I chose to no longer call myself a filmmaker, I call myself a storyteller. And the minute I changed that and did that shift, my world felt, totally different. It was the most incredible experience. And I actually am also a professor at Pepperdine, where I run a course, Storytelling in Our Words. And that almost sums up exactly what I feel about the industry and the real world, because they are beyond interconnected. Everything we do is a story. As Chris said, one of my favorite stories is 6 words, an Ernest Hemingway story. And it is for sale, baby shoes never worn. That's one of the most powerful stories I've ever been told. And then just to finish off, another practical reason why this industry can pervade everybody's life is because my ex-husband once said to me, well, what is our daughter, Isabella, going to do by being an actress? How's that going to help her when she needs an office job or doing something else? And I said, the skills that you can obtain by being in this industry are skills that you will use in life. So that's why I firmly believe that non-filmmakers should be part of this industry, because we all are anyway.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. Next is Haz Dulull. Haz, welcome. Tell us what you've been up to and how would you answer the question, what do non-filmmakers need to learn from the film industry?
Thanks, Larry. I don't know how I could follow up with those 2 amazing answers there, by the way. They're like so spot on. But I'm going to give it my take. So I'm Haz. I'm a director producer that works predominantly in film and television. The genres I tend to work in is science fiction. Both my films have been on Netflix, and I've recently directed something for Disney. And I've recently pivoted towards directing animation. So I'm currently on an animated feature. To answer the question, what can the other industries learn from film and television and games? I think the big one is collaboration. It's a collaborative industry. If you go on a film set, you see every single person that film set, even the person that is dealing with catering, plays a big part in making that final project, whether it's film or television. Same thing with video games. You go to a video game studio, you'll see that every single department, every single artist, technician, they all have to collaborate in order to make that final product. And it really is down to communication and collaboration. And it's an industry without collaboration, you just can't get to that end result. So, before I worked in that industry, I did a non-creative industry, and you really see how the other non-film creative industries don't have that collaborative nature like we do. So that is something I always like my partner who doesn't work in creative, she works in like finance and stuff. When she looks into it, goes, wow, everyone has to work together. And I think that's something I find that the creative industry, specifically film and television, we do that really well, and we have to do it so well in order to get to that point.
Okay, Hez, thank you. Josh Kohn, you're next. Josh, tell us what you've been up to and what's your answer to what everybody else can learn from film.
Sure. So I work primarily in the games industry. I've worked on both mobile and AAA games with IPs ranging from Family Guy to Harry Potter, AAA games being mostly Fortnite. And I currently work as a producer, which is altogether different in the games industry from a producer in the films industry, at a company called Level X, where I focus on client projects. And for me, the answer is really twofold, at least for games. The first is that games on one end of the spectrum are becoming more like films. Granted, that's because of how mediums evolved, and this is not really a surprise. As mediums grow and evolve, and as they develop more technology, there's a natural tendency to borrow from other mediums. We're seeing this every day with news articles about what game came out or what film is using some game technology. As that technology grows and becomes more flexible, it will start to emulate past mediums. But on the other end of the spectrum, games are becoming less and less like films. It really depends on who you ask. And the reason for that discrepancy is that's because creatively, games can be pretty much about anything.
Games can be pretty much about anything. I will hold you to that. We'll come back to that comment. That's a cool one. Vashi, where are you? There you are. Vashi, what's your thought on what non-filmmakers can learn from film? You're muted, sir. Vashi, you're muted.
Vashi, you are unmuted, but your audio source might be the wrong one.
No, still muted.
Try to see if your microphone is plugged in, and then you can see whether you're connected to the correct source, and that is next to the microphone button. A little arrow next to the microphone button.
How about that?
That's much better. Way to go.
Oh my God, thank you.
Okay,
that scared me. I apologize. Thank you, everyone, for all your great answers. And just to get into mine, I'm Vashi Nedomansky. I'm a feature film editor based out of Los Angeles. And my world lives in, working on feature films and trying to tell those stories. I've worked on films like Deadpool and Gone Girl, and even Sharknado 2, which is the best of the Sharknadoes, believe me. So with that, and the answer to the question that's being posed, I think there's two things that non-filmmakers can learn from the world that we all live in and work in. I think one is inspiration. I think especially over this last year where we've been locked in our homes with no other recourse or outlets to be stimulated, is to watch a lot of movies, to watch a lot of TV shows, to ingest, to play a lot of games. And I think that's been a saving grace, honestly, for the planet in a certain way where we can turn our brains off for a couple hours and either try and refresh or recharge or restart ourselves, because it's been a really trying time for everyone. So I think that outlet of trying to get inspiration, or even just the second point was a release from the pressure that we're all dealing with. So I believe that, both filmmaking, TV shows, games, all give us both inspiration and a release to be able to move forward every day, because it's not easy and we do need that outlet. And I think that really fills a nice niche for the planet.
Cool. Thank you very much. For me, a lot of us have talked about the uses of media. Vashi talks about using it to release from pressure, and Chris and Liz talks about the fact that it pervades our life. But I think to get more directly to my question, which is what can non-filmmakers learn from film and video? For me, no one reads today anymore. Published books, I can tell you from my sales that book sales are down. Magazines are in a world of trouble. Elizabeth, of course, has written the classic book. All right, so you've got 5 books in your boat. It's nice to know you're staying busy. But the point is that reading is not as vital to life today as images are. Look at what you post to social media. You post very, very short words, and you post pictures, or you post video. We communicate with images. And the problem is when we're communicating with images, we want to share our feelings, or we want to explore a subject or convince somebody to do something different. We're using images in a way that we used to use text for convincing people. But the problem is most of us are using images without having any understanding of how those images work. For me, the benefit of understanding how film and television works is that it improves our day-to-day communication. It explains how to use images to create powerful feelings, or to associate an idea with something that sticks in somebody's mind, or just to get the viewer's attention. And to me, it's applying the lessons of film and television games into our everyday life to enable an entrepreneur to pitch an investor for money, or to enable a business person to suggest a better way of working to the staff, or for all of us to try to find ways to communicate our ideas or convince people to do something different. Liz, I think, had a really good point. And Liz, I'm going to come back to you. You talk about the fact that industry pervades our life. Does that mean that people are thinking visually in ways they never used to?
Well, I think the step before that is that people don't realize that's how they're thinking. So when I run the course for the MBA, a lot of my business students, they have their concept of what they're trying to raise money for, or the business idea. And I have to take them back a stage to humanize it. And the humanizing aspect comes from looking at the senses. What is it that your people that you're talking to, whoever, wherever, are going to connect with? And I think that's why the industry, people don't realize that that's what's needed in whatever industry you're in, because it's about connecting on a human level. We all say, that old story of when you're selling a property, make the coffee smell nice, bake some bread. It's the same concept. These images, the feelings, the thought-provoking aspects, your pitch deck that should only be 5 slides and could just be images. All of this melds together. And I think that's where people are starting to realize that that is what they're doing now, even if they didn't know they were doing it.
Cool. By the way, everybody that's watching is welcome to ask questions, and do so on the chat, and we will tackle those as the questions come in. You said something, you talked about the fact that one of the essential elements of filmmaking is collaboration. Yet for most of us who are working from home, we're isolated more than ever. It's harder and harder to collaborate. How can anybody that's trapped in a home office, or unfortunately stuck on a boat with a laptop, how can they possibly collaborate? And how do they benefit from the collaboration in the film industry in their non-film life?
It's an interesting one, because for the last year or so, the whole of 2020, me and my team have been working remotely, and we asked ourselves, is it going to be possible to actually pull off? We recently did a pilot for a network. We're like, how are we going to pull this off? How are we going to get notes? And because when Elizabeth, you kind of mentioned it, when you walk in the room, it really is about the person, understanding from a human level. How do you do that remotely via Zoom or something? And I think it's one of those things where, keep your communication simple. I've realized by working remotely that I'm keeping all of my notes from a director, giving notes to my team, or receiving notes from the studio network executives. All the notes are very succinct. No one's giving these long-winded email notes, or you jump on a phone and have this long conversation. You're having very succinct notes. The other thing is, technology has allowed us massively to work this way. I can't imagine working this way like 7 years ago. Yes, we had Skype and so on, but now when I do a review, I share my screen and I'm able to scrub through the edit, for example, and everyone can see that. We use things like, we use something called Sync Sketch at the moment, which is this amazing tool, which you can download for free. It's a beta. And I could feed that in annotate, press send, and everyone on my team sees that note and comment. I'm finding it's getting easier and easier. But yes, it doesn't replace the personal touch. But I think, everyone that works in that way, for me, for example, I set a routine. Every morning we have a group Zoom call, and then everyone's leaving notes on the sync sketch. We use something called Trello so that everyone can see notes. We try to minimize the amount of physical typing we have to do on emails, because no one likes to read big, long emails. And I find that because of this way we're working remotely, because everyone has to work remotely, we're forcing ourselves to find the most efficient way of working. And that really reflects in our productivity as well, because now we're getting way more edits done, we're getting way more shots done, visual effects is sending stuff quicker. I'm getting more time to think as a filmmaker, the pacing of my shots or my shot selection in terms of animation, the previs that I'm doing. And that's because I'm being really smart and efficient on how I'm communicating with people and how I'm working remotely. So in a way, the remote working has actually made me, personally, I can speak for myself, is the fact that it's made me think more efficiently. I'm not like taking long trips down for meetings or delaying things. And I think that's been a silver lining for me on my end.
Chris, you made a comment earlier. You said that people need to learn everything. Doesn't that set everybody up for failure? Because look at how long you've been working in the media industry and how every time you do a project, you learn something new. And to say before you can even start, you have to learn everything is a guaranteed exercise in frustration. Because even people like you or I who've been doing this for decades, there's still tons that I don't know. So do you really mean that?
Well, yes, but maybe not the way you understood it, or maybe I phrased it wrong. There's tons to learn from the industry. You can go in and focus on specific areas, and it's not exclusive to just filmmaking and games. Similar techniques are used in music. For example, tension and release. We do this in script writing. One of the things that I've seen, for example, in corporate presentations, where whether you're pitching or doing whatever it is, right, or trying to get people aligned, is this monotonous PowerPoint presentation that puts everybody to sleep. That blows my mind. That's a very simple thing that we understand in content creation, in filmmaking, in games. You need the peaks and the valleys. You can't have this monotonous noise, if you will, just running across the board. It'll no matter how good the content is, it'll put people to sleep. So to get back to your question or your point, Larry, there's tons to learn. Maybe that's the way I should have phrased it. You can go in and find incredible areas. One of the things, to Haz's point, is I find that our industry is not as siloed. We tend to cross-pollinate quite a bit. So, I've had the privilege of working at Adobe and other big companies, and working for big companies through my little company. So I've had both, the small startup through to the big process-laden beasts out there, like I don't need to name names. And I have to say, most big companies are siloed, and that's to their detriment. There's a reason for it. It's interesting, and it gets bigger companies to a certain point, maybe a little bit quicker, but I find cross-pollination or collaboration infinitely valuable. So I hope that clears it up a bit, Larry.
It does indeed. Vashi, I haven't forgotten about you, but I'm going to go to Josh next. So Vashi has to stay away.
All good.
Josh, you talk about the fact that games can be anything. Can games be applied to the real world?
Absolutely. You see that in numerous ways. You can see that through research. You can see that through trying to instill empathy in the same way that movies are made. Games are made for the same reason. It's just not something that's really talked about that often. But when I say that games can be anything, I sincerely and really mean it. They can be thematically about anything if they're designed correctly, if they're designed with the theme in mind. It could be a wonderful game, or it can be a wonderful experience, or it can be something that instills empathy in somebody who's playing with it, or some other feeling, whether it's education or problem solving.
Well, let me be the Luddite that I am, because I have not found any value in games whatsoever. What's the value of playing games in trying to solve real world problems? That's to Josh.
You know, there's multiple answers to this question, and it's actually something I go over about in my talk on Sunday. But just to give you a little bit of preview, games by their very nature, when they're designed, when they're researched, when they're created, they're built out of reality. There are games that I've played that translate into real world knowledge. Like, for example, I have gotten to a game called Oxygen Not Included. Basics premise is that you are transported into a middle of a rock and you have to find a way to survive. And that includes getting oxygen, water, food, but the game doesn't give it to you. The game tells you what obstacles you're going to face, but you have to engineer the solution. So through gameplay, you're learning things about air pressure, water pressure, how to grow crops, right? And granted, it's fictional and a bit sci-fi and a bit cartoony. At the same time, though, it's based in reality. And to even get further down to your point, there are games out there specifically designed just to teach or just for research purposes. One of the most famous ones is called Fold It, where it's a game about folding proteins. And what's interesting about that game is they brought a problem that was plaguing AIDS researchers in the AIDS epidemic. There was a protein sniping enzyme that they couldn't quite figure out why it was doing that. So they put this problem to the Fold It platform, and it's a problem that was plaguing them for 10 years. Gamers, they figured it out in 10 days. So not only is it a platform for learning, it is a platform intended to solve questions.
Cool. Thank you, Josh. Elizabeth, just a heads up. If you take a look at the chat, there's a question from Paul coming up. When we get to questions, I'm going to come to you first for the answer, and I want to give you some time to think about it. Vashi, you mentioned that one of the benefits of being in the lockdown is that media has been able to give us creative inspiration and a release from the daily pressure. How does that, I mean, from a personal point of view, I can see how that applies to our personal life, but can that be applied to our work life as well?
To our work life, I mean, I think we're trying always to separate our, our private life and our intake of media and stuff in our work life. I think for me, it's finding a show or finding a program, something that, again, just lets me step back and refresh myself, because I know for myself, I can only speak for me, this last year, I've worked probably harder at home and more hours than I've ever worked, because I am home. There's no commute. I have all the technology I need. I have all the hard drives, the computers, the monitors. I have a better setup at home than I have at any studio I've ever worked at, which is a good thing for the creative aspect. But what it does to me is I'll work longer and harder and into the night, and then you go to sleep and then you wake up and it's the afternoon because you had a deadline or whatever. So my take is, with everything that's out there for us to consume, and consume is not the best word, is to selectively choose what we want to watch or experience. I think there's so many options now where it does give you, I almost equate it to sleep sometimes, where I'm like, I'll sleep for 6 hours, but I'll watch something if I just need to restart my clock, right? Like, all right, I'm gonna have dinner, but I'm gonna watch a show because this is important to me. And it'll give me that break in my day. Like Queen's Gambit, for example, just random thing. Like, who would think that a Netflix show about chess would appeal to so many people? Like, I grew up playing chess with my mom. She beat me every time. I gave up on chess because I was horrible. And so she took advantage of me on that. But now, after watching a show like that over a couple of days, I was like, let me go get that Gary Kasparov masterclass. I want to learn more about chess. I want to learn more about positioning and momentum and all these different aspects that translate from a show. And that show, I'm sure most of you know, is like, it took like 15 years to get done, to actually come onto the market and to be made. It went to like 15 studios and everyone said, no, no one wants to watch a show about chess. Well, I watched episode 1. I'm like, this is one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. And it's about chess. And I want to learn more about the process. And it forced me to go down an alley that I normally wouldn't go. And I was really rewarded for that. And to me, that was like equivalent to 6 hours of sleep every time I watch an episode, because I was invigorated and excited. And I would funnel that into my work that I'm doing at home, where it's already chaotic and overworked, but it gave me hope. It gave me excitement. It gave me energy. And I think if I can get that from entertainment or media or something, then it's a good sign coming from me.
Cool. Thank you. Hello, host. It's your turn to get off your mute and turn your mic on and read Paul's question, because I want to go to some of the questions.
Oh, no. Thank you very much, Larry. So the first question, which you directed to Elizabeth, is where do you see the cinema in the next 5 years in spite of the streaming platforms?
Yeah, Elizabeth, tell us
Okey-dokey.
what's going to happen here.
Yes, okay, I'll just look into my crystal ball. I'll give you two answers, because one is based on being a director and the other one is based on what I actually genuinely think is going to happen. So as a director, I actually quite like the fact that the pressure is off to try and get my film theatrically released, because it's almost like there's this thing where people don't think you've made a real movie unless it's theatrically released. And so now we're being given ourselves this opportunity to say, okay, look, I've got it onto a streaming platform, and that's just as good as. So for me, I quite like the feeling now that it's equalized it in that sense. I know that there are some films that are specifically made that should only be shown in the massive screens with the amazing sound system. I totally get that. You know, Mission Impossible is not going to be the same on my iPad. I get that. So I to answer the question, I feel like we're going to have to go back to a time when it was something special. And what I mean by that is, I think it became too expensive. I think it became, I'm talking about normal theatres, not kind of the cool ones in Hollywood or wherever. A normal movie theatre to go with a family is expensive. It felt like, I don't know, there was a dirtiness about some of these places. They were old. And actually what I feel we're going to be able to do now is rejuvenate that. And I look forward to something as an experience now, much more than I'm just going to go to the movies. Actually, it's going to be something that they're going to have to think outside of the box. What else can you utilize that space for? What else can you get from that experience of going to the movie theater? Is it that there is an exhibition that's also being shown to do with the movie? Have you got a different talk happening? I enjoy going and getting a nice meal at the movie theater, or you can do the other option and you can just go there for the film. That's absolutely fine. But there's a choice. And going back to what you said about books, I feel like it's that. I feel like there's all this great technology and we're all streaming and we can all have Kindles, but there is nothing better than a book. There's nothing better than putting pen to paper. And I know, as you mentioned that as well, not these long emails. So I'm not saying that there isn't a place for technology and games and streaming and all of this, but there's also, if done well, a place for us to go back to picking up a book, writing a letter, and watching something with an experience, as opposed to it's the only option.
Elizabeth, as someone who has both written books and enjoys sitting and reading books, I agree totally that there's something wonderful about holding a book in your hand that a Kindle doesn't equal. Has the same question to you. What do you see as the future of cinema? You do animated films and stuff that's
live action, yeah.
Broader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's, I can definitely 1000% echo what Elizabeth said about, the pressure is definitely off. Like, when I did my first movie, like, it was like theatrical. And we got limited theatrical, but it was mainly for marketing purposes. We didn't make any money on the theatrical. It's an independent movie, right? We made our money on the streaming site and so on. But to answer the question of what the future would be like, for me, I think it would be events. It'll be an eventful thing. Like, I've seen a lot of these movies. Like I think Dunkirk was the last one I heard about, where they have Hans Zimmer and the orchestra, and they'll play the orchestra of the soundtrack live while the movie's being projected on this amazing IMAX screen, for example, that is worth the ticket to go there, because you can't get that at home. So I think, you know, the future of cinema is going to be distributors are going to cherry pick the type of films that are going to be the event movies, kind of like the equivalent of a tentpole movie, you know, like the Avengers or Star Wars, except now you're not just going there to watch the movie with an amazing crowd and that great vibe that, you know, I have to admit I miss. You know, now you're going there, you're going to see, you know, you're going to see the soundtrack, you know, hear the soundtrack played by a live orchestra. You're going to have certain events, maybe, you know, cosplay. It'll be a night to remember. It wouldn't be the same sort of night like, oh, I saw this great movie. It was a great screen. The sound sounded amazing. Because let's face it, a lot of that you can get that at home. You know, you're just getting a better version. Whereas I think that's going to be the future of cinema. It's going to be events. And, you know, like maybe that's the reason why, you know, James Bond is taking its time to get released, because they're maybe rethinking how they're going to release that and how to make that an experience itself. So definitely events, that's going to be the future.
Haz, let me come back to you, because I suddenly realized as you and Elizabeth were talking, and Josh, just to give you a head up, you're getting the next question, so take a look at the chat. Haz and Elizabeth, what you're describing is live theater with a recorded picture. It sounds like what we're getting back to is film has to be theater in order to attract an audience. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, in the next generation of theatre, you know, it could be a mix of great projection mapping with, but something that feels special that you cannot get. It's kind of like when I went to the theatre, you know, I watched the Book of Mormon. You know, I just knew that's not the same thing as watching a comedy at home. Yes, I watch tons of sitcoms and I laugh, but there's something about being in the theatre. You know, there's that level of improvisation as well in there. So yeah, it will be like it's next generation theatre, I think. Yeah.
Elizabeth?
It's definitely about, yes, it's definitely about, as I said, utilizing what we already have and understanding that we're now going to that next stage. It's the time of change. It's the industrial revolution. Education needs to change. The way we watch movies is changing. Everything is changing. It's time for that change. And it doesn't mean to say that what we've done is not good, but it's about understanding what works and tweaking things.
Okay, host, you're back up. Next question.
Thank you. So question to Josh. Do you feel as though gaming has a role in EdTech and future creativity in education?
Absolutely. Without question. Without question. You know, there are studies out there that actually state that playing Dungeons and Dragons actually primes students for interdisciplinary learning, including STEM. But making games part of the coursework in classes, yeah, definitely. Because gaming can create a dynamic that can inspire learners to develop skills and competencies as they focus on the activity of the game. And when they do that, they learn through the process of playing it, and it provides a context for engaging practice. Through games, students can learn a variety of important skills. And while playing them, students develop a connection with the content and can form positive memories of learning. Minecraft is even a good example. There's an educational version of Minecraft, believe it or not. And that's just because the sandbox, which is basically an open area that players can do whatever they want in, provides a variety of things that gamers can experiment with. But going back to into the classroom, you know, there is an ability for games to reinforce the fact that failure is not a setback, nor is it an outcome, but rather an indication that more skill building is needed. So you get that feedback loop of communication, because at the end of the day, games are a primary method of communication.
Chris?
Alternatively, they also learn about procedure and the value of alternative paths. They help students become more confident and become independent thinkers who are more prepared to take on larger projects because they can actively carry them through to completion. But I think the most important thing is that games can grab students' attention and actively engage with them.
Chris, what's your thought?
Josh, spot on, man. Interactivity, engagement, enabling, it's all there in the gaming world, right? And if you can get the students to be, you know, really engaged in the content, and you can create this bi-directionality one way or another, whether it's with an AI agent in a game or with, you know, intervention from a professor, this is incredibly powerful. And I mean, I have 4 children, by the way, ranging from 16 to 30. So, I've watched them grow in this modern day and age. They're all somehow involved in gaming. That's part of their day to day. Discord is a subset, so to speak, or a complement to the whole gaming. Discord is a sort of like a Skype for gamers, I suppose, is one way to describe it. This is part of their day to day. One of the things that I've evangelized to a lot of the people that I advise and companies that I work with is you need to take a gamification approach to your whole UX, whether it's software, whether it's you're a banking service, it doesn't matter. UX is not limited or exclusive to software. It's everywhere. And that we have gaming to thank for, basically.
Vashi, I want to get back to a comment that you made. You were talking about the fact that when you were working from home, you got more work done at home than you got in the studio for a variety of reasons. You've got the gear and you don't have the commute. But it seems to me the big challenge of working from home is knowing when to stop. What are your thoughts?
I think for all creatives and every single person on this panel, which I wish this was like a 6-hour session so we could all exchange notes and try and better ourselves, but I'll stick to the timeline. But yeah, I think it's so hard at home because that work-life balance is so taxing on us, because every creative person wants to deliver the best product or the best end goal of whatever you're making. You want it to be the best. It's a representation of you, right? So if you cut a corner or you don't color correct something, or the audio is kind of shitty on this one little thing, like that hurts me. Like I don't want to share anything with the world until it's almost as perfect or as close to perfect as I can get it. So I will push myself harder because I'm at home, because I know that within 30 seconds I can go lay down and go to sleep, or go take a break, or walk the dog, or go make dinner. So I push myself harder at home because I know I have there's that allowance of time and space that I'm already at home around my family, around my loved ones. And so it's like a curse and also a blessing, but I just think that as long as you're proud of the end goal, I think every filmmaker and game developer is a maniac lunatic. I think we're all on this panel, we're all lunatics at heart, which is the best thing possible, because no one wants a boring whatever. Just show your emotions, show your character, show your personality, and have some fun with it. And those are the people you want to work with. I'm going to reach out to all of you after this because I'm loving this so much and it's really exciting. And that makes me feel good that there's other like-minded people out there that I know are, kind of cuckoo, and that's a good thing. So thank you for having me on. And that's my take on that, Larry, in terms of
thank you. And the rest of the lunatics in this asylum appreciate
good struggle.
Just a quick reminder, we're going to be wrapping up in about 5 minutes. So if you have a question you want to ask, please enter it into the chat.
I think we have a question from Glenn.
Go for it.
Just arrived. So with things like Hollywood actors lending their voices and likenesses to games, Netflix making choose your own adventure episodes of shows, and more film and TV productions using gaming engines, another question. So gaming engines for their effect scenes. How will the lines blur between cinema and gaming, passive and active entertainment going forward? Which is very interesting because I kind of also had that question. We're approaching this era where we're trying to make our experiences immersive and interactive as possible. And this is where cinematography and gaming come very closely together, with all the CGI and storytelling being the sort of mutual aspect of that. So if you could answer Glenn's question with my additional notes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and we've only got about 4 minutes, guys, so keep your answers short. And Haz, I'm going to give it to you because I want to see what you think of the word
You must
short.
have read my mind, man, because that's exactly how I wanted to go first. Yeah. Well, just to answer that question, yes, the lines are blurred massively. Just to give an example, right now, I'm currently in production on an animated feature, which is completely done out of the Unreal game engine. And when I mean completely, it's final pixels. We're not going traditional ways of making animation where you had to do layers and layers of rendering, composite it. light it and put it and then put out in the edit and make changes. It's a big process. Whereas in video games, we're taking the amazing video game technology we have today, which is, I don't know if any of you saw the Unreal Engine PlayStation 5 demo, which blew my mind. But that means that, you know, it's accessible to every filmmaker, by the way. It's not for the big Pixars or the big Warners. Anyone can pick up Unreal Engine and make a movie, whatever style you want it. You want to make it toon shade, you want to make game cinematic style, you want to do whatever style, you can do it. And that's because the lines are blurred massively. I wouldn't be in the position I am today if it wasn't for that convergence of video game and film.
Okay, everybody wants to agree or disagree with this, but I want to move on to the questions. Melba has a question. Host, do you want to tackle that?
Melba says, seems our content options and modes for distributions are now endless. How has that changed your creative process over time? And how do you think it has changed all of us viewers?
Elizabeth?
Well, for me, it still goes back to the word quality. Look, I can have my iPhone and I can go around and take photos. It doesn't mean I'm a photographer. You know, it's yes, we have all these amazing areas that we can go to now and deliver things and put platforms, and I can put my YouTube video up, whatever I want to do. But it doesn't mean necessarily quality is going to come through. And it always comes back to story. It's always about the story. So if you have made a story on your iPhone and it's very good, it'll find its place. What is the purpose of what you're making? What is the story for it? The platforms have opened us up to find people that maybe we didn't know before that were skilled, and it's given you this open opportunity, but it'll still be down to quality.
Host, next one. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Corey asks, do you feel that gaming has taken its place about other mediums, such as film and television, as an accepted mainstream art form and not simply entertainment?
Josh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, there are specific awards and multiple different organizations giving out awards for different types of games. You know, most emotive, games for change. There's a whole bunch. Games can be art. And it's what I said earlier at the top of the hour. We are seeing the lines blur between movies and games. As we evolve this industry, we are certainly going to take things from games. And part of that is definitely making games an art form.
And I mean, I think obviously the people have spoken when it comes to gaming versus like the film world, where look how much money, if you're talking just profit, like look how much gaming brings in every year compared to the film industry. I think it's like 5 or 6 times the amount. Josh, you know, I'm sure you have a better grasp on that. And I'm not saying a financial number means it's better or whatever. I'm just saying so many more people are involved in the gaming world and the filmmaking world, but there's a core to it there that they want to play. And I've been playing, you know, my whole life as well. So it's part of me and it's a part of everyone.
If you look at the revenue numbers of what the gaming industry produces and what film and TV and other mediums do, they surpassed all the other mediums years ago.
Yeah.
Guys, we've got 3 minutes left. And what I want to do is I want to go around the panel and ask everybody in 30 seconds or less to say, what's the key takeaway that non-filmmakers need to learn from film? What's in 30 seconds, what's the key takeaway? And for me, the key takeaway is to learn how to communicate using visuals more effectively, to be able to harness the emotion and the power and the communication ability in visuals, and not just simply use them because it's a pretty picture, but use them because it reinforces the message that you're trying to get across. And Elizabeth, I'm going to go to you next. What's your key takeaway?
Okay, I think it's about telling stories that matter. So if it's something that you know about or something that you're interested in, that's going to come across with whether you're using something in business, whether you're using a pitch, whether you're a teacher and you're telling your students a story that means something that you can grasp, and tell that story in a way that engages your audience, not just through a plain words. It is images, visuals.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Chris, what's your thought?
Story, of course, absolutely. To add to that, probably take off the blinders. look at cross-disciplining, look at, peek over into other areas like filmmaking, like the gaming world, and extract what's valuable and bring it into your project. That would be a big one for me.
Chris, that was Chris. Chris, thank you. And Haz, what's your thought?
I think mine would be the point of escapism through experience. That's the big thing for me. Like, like whether you're watching a movie, a TV show, playing a game, you're giving audiences that were probably not, like, for example, I had no idea about chess. I just thought chess was boring. And then, watch that show, like, holy crap, like, I want to go learn chess now. I had no idea. So yeah, Vashi, you're spot on, man. That's exactly it. So for me, it's like the key takeaway is providing an experience for audiences,
short
members. Yeah, there you go. That's it. Experience.
Vashi, what you got? Short.
I would say, again, storytelling. If you can do something elegantly and concisely, then that's the best way to do it. And if you throw a surprise in there as well, that's storytelling. Elegant, concise, and a surprise.
Josh.
I would say that games, like movies and TVs, like any other medium, are just as powerful and just as useful as any other tool in your toolbox for stories, for learning, for changing you.
On behalf of the entire panel, I want to thank you for joining us. It's been a fun morning or afternoon or evening, depending upon where in the world you are. My name's Larry Jordan, and have yourself a wonderful day.